strategic plan for higher education that the State Board is required to submit in September. I'm so pleased to be in this beautiful northwestern region of Commonwealth. It really is beautiful here. And thank you so much to Penn West for hosting us today. President Anderson, of thank yous in a moment. But let me also at this time thank our board and all of the hundreds of stakeholders who have participated in these hearings. So board members have spent the first year of this board engaged in a very time-consuming but exhilarating strategic planning process. They've traveled far, or they have been very diligent attending these meetings virtually, and they're doing all of this, during their day jobs and their other significant obligations. We can't thank them enough for their dedication. As you heard, we have a quorum. This is the fifth one of these, so our board is still very, very much engaged. And I'm pleased to report that at this point we have roughly 1,000 individuals who will have given feedback on goals and strategies for higher education in the Commonwealth. Feedback is being analyzed, and it's going to be used to create a new vision and an action plan for how our educational sector can best support Pennsylvanians and the Pennsylvania economy. And just a note, a sixth and final hearing will be held in Harrisburg this summer, and that meeting will be focused on obtaining input into the full draft strategic plan. So today we're getting the input in order to write the strategic plan draft, and then in the summer, that final hearing, have an opportunity to actually see and comment on the draft itself. So let me get back to President Anderson. John, thank you so much to you and your staff for this beautiful setting and for this warm hospitality. I noticed the chips and salsa. I think that's awesome, and I assume there will be margaritas for everyone afterwards. Okay, good, thank you. Penn West is the host today, as it represents Pennsylvania's public state-owned four-year institutions, and their mission of providing high-quality education to Commonwealth citizens, and by doing so, being a mainstay of support for the economic, social, and cultural development of the Commonwealth. As chair of PASHE's Board of Governors, which I'm doing concurrently with chairing the State Board of Higher Education, I'm particularly proud of being here, and I'm so glad to see our public institutions engaged in this strategic planning effort. So with that, Dr. Anderson, I'm going to ask you to come up and say a few words to welcome us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Esteemed members of the board, we thank you for your time being here and had the chance to attend the CCAC hearing. It was a fabulous discussion there, and I can assure you this one will be equally as lively. Got a lot of members of our faculty and staff here from our Penn West Edinboro campus. We're grateful for their attendance, and it's great to see all of you in some form other than Zoom this summer. I want to begin by sharing just a few highlights about Penn West, where we are in this integration journey. There's a lot going on in higher education across Pennsylvania right now. We're one of the test cases of what a great institution can become. Our most important piece, obviously, is our students. We are proud as Penn West to be the second largest public university in Western Pennsylvania, serving more than 10,000 students across our 4 campuses, including California, Clarion, Edinboro, and our largest campus, Global Online. More than 2,500 students graduated last fall and spring, joining our network of more than 200,000 alumni worldwide. Highlight a few of our students and a few things that they're doing. First, Andre Dowdle Jr., Penn West Edinboro graduate and a former Fighting Scot football player, was recently featured in Forbes for founding Liquida Capital, a company that provides funding for solutions for small businesses. Maddie Quinn, a Penn West nursing graduate, along with over 700 nursing graduates, is embarking on an impactful career as a bone marrow transplant nurse at UPMC. Dominic Santia, a chemistry graduate, was recognized across Pennsylvania state system of higher education when he was named a finalist for the 2025 Saeed R. Al-Zawadi Award for Academic Excellence. Maddie Cowie, a communications science and disorders graduate whose personal experience with family members with autism inspired her career path, is now working in her field in her hometown. Penn West University's digital filmmaking and photography program, known as FILM, P-H-I-L-M, has achieved a significant milestone, surpassing 100 festival competition awards in the last 6 years. As graduating seniors, electrical engineering technology program, Josh Zucker and Andres Matillo teamed up to develop an autonomous vehicle using their own knowledge, computer science, math, and electronic engineering, which they're taking to market. Economics major Deletta Mungo and interdisciplinary studies major Waira Robertson, who graduated this last spring, both were selected to present Federal Reserve Bank Covetta's Economic Scholars Program. Clearly, Penn West is providing a quality education for students who come here. But that's not all. We're working to prepare the next generation of workforce leaders. We're focused on preparing students in in-demand careers. Graduate enrollment rose about 11% in the spring over last year. Online enrollment climbed about 10%, underscoring the demand for the programs we offer that are flexible, career-ready, and preparing people for the next generation. We, along with the other PASHE institutions, have held tuition flat. Being affordable and accessible is a key to our success in the future. We are continuing to build workforce partnerships, like a new plastics injection molding concentration with the American Injection Molding Institute, ensuring alignment between our academic work and workforce needs. As we look to the future, we and other PASHE institutions remain committed to this idea of financial sustainability and welcome accountability and guidance in that process. The system redesign and the performance-based funding of PASHE ensure that resources are allocated based on measurable outcomes, aligning funding and our workforce and educational goals. We want the board to know we welcome that guidance, welcome the accountability, and appreciate the transparency. Thank you for your work. Penn West, as a proud member of the PASHE system, serves as a catalyst for economic development in Western Pennsylvania and a hub for workforce preparation. Its vital education reaches communities that other places cannot. We are proud to be part of the PASHE system. We are proud to be part of the ecosystem of higher education in Pennsylvania. And we look forward to all the work that this good board is going to do. We look forward to supporting it in any way that we can. I want to welcome each of you to our Edinburgh campus of Penn West and sincerely thank you for your work and the many good days ahead. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. We really appreciate those words and love hearing about all the great stuff going on here and the wonderful students, amazing students. The bulk of the meeting is going to be devoted to a format that some of you may be familiar with. We are going to be reviewing the draft goals that are going to be the main part of the strategic plan and looking to you for input on strategies that would make each one give us the ability to actually implement and achieve these goals. Dr. Kate Shaw, who's Executive Director of the Board, is going to lead most of that meeting, and we truly look forward to tailoring it, this conversation to learn about the Northwest region and what the specific needs and strategies might be for this region of the state. So with that, I'm just going to get us started. Oh, there it is, up there. Can people, oh, okay, good. Just want to make sure everyone can see the deck. Okay, let me just start. I'm just going to, by way of introduction, before I turn it over to Kate, So the mission of the State Board of Higher Education, which really began its work in October 2024, is to provide direction, coordination, and support to ensure that institutions of higher education here in the Commonwealth meet the workforce and economic needs, and ensure that all residents of the Commonwealth have access to affordable, world-class post-secondary education. So those are two closely related pieces of the mission, but it is formulated around this idea that economic and workforce development is a primary place for higher education to play a major and critically important role for the Commonwealth. There are 21 members on the new State Board of Higher Education. The legislators who wrote this bill, along with the governor and the administration, were very careful to ensure representation. So we have on the board students, legislators, business leaders, labor leaders, and representatives from each sector of higher education in the Commonwealth. Okay, next slide, great, okay. So today's hearing, as I said, is just one part of a broader process to gather feedback across the Commonwealth. And by design, you know, we have invited a broad range of individuals, but those who are really engaged in higher education to give feedback in these hearings, and that is all of you. And I have to say, this room is it's almost full, and I'm just so impressed and so gratified by that, that you all care so much and came out to do this in person. We'll also have a survey instrument, and that will also help us get feedback into this process, and that is going to be accessible through the QR code on the signs that we have in the room. You can also find it on the website, and we'll share that information again at the end. So it really is our goal to obtain feedback from thousands of Pennsylvanians, and we're well on the way to doing that, and to inform the development of a new vision for higher education in the Commonwealth. And again, we are asking for your help in that effort. Let's go to slide 4. Okay, this is basically how we're going to go about doing it. We wanted you to know what the major steps and the timeline are in this process. So again, we're going to share a draft of the strategic planning goals with you today, along with information that will place each goal in a context. Generally, in the Commonwealth and even beyond, but also more specifically around the Northwest region here. So then what we're going to ask you to do is to give your feedback on that would be actual concrete strategies that you would suggest that we consider to meet the goals. And, you know, and if you have something that you know, sort of want to say to, I don't know, critique anything, that's great, but you have to follow it up with how you would solve it. Okay, those are the rules. And just so you know, you can see on the timeline, we're now in the middle of May, and we are due to have this plan for adoption in September of this year. Okay, so let's get to the goals themselves. When I turn it over to Dr. Shaw, she's going to walk through information and context for each one of them, but let's just look and see what they are. And, you know, they're all interrelated, some more related than others, as you will see. We want to very much increase post-secondary credential attainment. We'll talk about that and what we mean by post-secondary credentials. We want to, in order to do that, ensure affordable pathways to post-secondary credential attainment. Third goal, very important goal, is to support the economic development needs of the Commonwealth. And the other side of that equation is once, you know, we're on the way to developing the economies here, well, then you need to develop the workforce, right, that is able to work in those economic areas, be they new businesses or businesses that come in, new industries, advancement of industries through technology, et cetera. We need to have a workforce that can come into that economy. And then the last two, I think, relate sort of more directly to our institutions and higher education, in that we want to ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. We want everyone in the state, every taxpayer, certainly every legislator, to feel that higher education is a great investment. And the people who are seeking higher education, post-secondary education, are also an investment that the state wants to make. And going along with that, we have a great, an important goal to strengthen the fiscal health and stability of our higher education sector here in the Commonwealth. And we know, and we'll get more information from Dr. Shaw on this, that higher education in Pennsylvania, in other parts of the country too, but here in Pennsylvania, we face a number of challenges. Again, we're not unique in this, but we are looking at this as an unprecedented opportunity to meet these challenges in a way that turns them into opportunities. We know our schools are doing remarkable work serving our students and our communities, so we have a lot to build on. But we on the board have taken the positive attitude that challenges are actually opportunities. And we have a clean slate. This is a brand new board. You know, we can go in any direction, but we have this great possibility before us. And that's why we're really reaching out to you today to help us fulfill that potential. All right, so I think at this point, am I turning it over to you, Kate? I believe I am, yes.
All right. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
I'm just going to walk around a little. Am I on mic?
Your mic.
Am I good? Okay. So this is the 5th regional hearing that we are having, and I'm going to admit that I am sick of listening to myself talk because I present these slides in this PowerPoint deck all the time to people, both in these larger hearings and also in smaller meetings. But one of the things that has become clear is that every time I do it, we get different kind of feedback. It's really important for us to understand the regional differences in how people respond to these goals and what we might do in order to meet them. And so we are really happy so many people from the northwestern part of the state are here today, because I can assure you what you say about how we should meet these goals is going to vary pretty dramatically in many instances than what people maybe in southeastern Pennsylvania might have told us, or even northeastern Pennsylvania. So thank you for being here. So I have one of these little pointers. So what I'm going to do for each goal is I'm just going to walk through the goal. I'm going to give you some information that sort of contextualizes the goal. I could probably write a dissertation on each one of these goals, but we don't need that because I think everybody knows the challenges that are facing our sector. And the real question is, how are we going to solve those problems? How are we going to strengthen higher education? How are we going to put higher education in the middle of economic prosperity for the Commonwealth? That's really the question. So as Cindy said, plenty of people can say, and you're welcome to say, you know what, I think higher education is, too expensive. Okay, agreed. How are we going to solve that problem? So that's what I'm going to be looking for from you all. And we created these hearings as town halls rather than your more traditional panels of experts, because we feel like the people who come here are showing us they have a vested interest in higher education and that they have things to tell us that are just as important as what any quote unquote expert might have to say. We feel you are the experts about higher ed. So that's why this is a town hall. And that's why we're really looking for, your engagement. So as we go through, when it comes time to sort of weigh in on a goal, please, my colleague Lubna is going to be running around with a microphone, and we're going to call on folks in this room and also people online, because we have quite a few people that are participating virtually. Okay. I'm just going to get started. So our first goal is about credential attainment. And the goal is to increase post-secondary credential attainment. But it's really important to note that when we say credential attainment, we don't necessarily mean traditional 4-year degrees or 2-year degrees. We also mean short-term credentials aligned to workforce needs. Any kind of education that happens after high school, that's what we're talking about. And it's really important that we increase our attainment level. So let me give you some information. So you see that map right there. What that map does is it shows you what our attainment levels look like by region. So overall, we're about average compared to other states in terms of the percentage of individuals in Pennsylvania that have a post-secondary credential. But what you see is that it varies dramatically by region. So the 3 green areas are basically, that's Penn State in the middle, and many of those students don't stay in the central part of the state, but they're producing a lot of credentials. You see Philadelphia, you see the Pittsburgh area. And then in other parts of the state, you don't see as much credential attainment. And in fact, we see really low credential attainments in many parts of the Commonwealth. And there's lots of reasons for that. But that's really important for us to know, because one of the things we also know is that high-paying employers are looking for talent. And if we increase the talent level, especially in regions where we have low levels of credential attainment, we increase the possibility that we're going to attract the kind of employers that are going to help people stay in those regions. This is a major challenge to our credential attainment level. We are seeing dramatic drops in enrollment in post-secondary education all the way across all of our sectors. We see the most dramatic drop in the community colleges in PASHE, but I want to point out with community colleges that that data only points to credit-bearing courses, and increasingly community colleges are doing what we call workforce development credentialing, and that oftentimes doesn't carry college credit. But still, we're seeing big drops across 10 years in all of them. And one of the things we wanted to make sure that we noted is that when you break apart the state-related branch campuses from the state-related main campuses, you see dramatic, pretty significant drops there as well. So this is a problem. This is another problem. This is what we call the demographic cliff. So we know over the next, 15 years or so, we're going to see a significantly dropping percentage of, or number of high school students that are graduating in Pennsylvania. And that drop is going to be about 12%. So that means the number of traditionally aged college students that we might enroll is actually going to drop. We're not going to have as many people in that pool to enroll. We also know that the number of working age adults is also going to be dropping over the next 15 years or so. And these are also important to us, both in terms of enrollment and attainment levels, because many of them have some college and no degree, and also in terms of our workforce shortages, and we have a lot of those. So over 1 million people in Pennsylvania have some college but never completed their degree. And again, there's probably lots of reasons for that. We don't know exactly the reason for every person who left, but we do know that they're close to getting a credential. And it's important for us to think about how to increase the overall attainment level by finding ways to get them across the finish line. This is a little map that is focused on the northeastern region of the state. The northwestern, sorry. And these are the higher ed institutions and campuses that we have in this region. When we look at other regions of the state, like southeastern Pennsylvania, you see, like hundreds of institutions. We don't see as many here. We see, we see areas where we don't have any campuses at all. And the distribution of our higher education institutions has no rhyme or reason. There was never a master plan. We never planned how higher education would sort of fan out across the Commonwealth. And so we see areas that have pockets of plenty of options for students, and then other areas where students really don't have options. And that also contributes to the uneven attainment level that we see in the Commonwealth. So I'm going to stop there because I think that's plenty of information to sort of think about. And I'm going to ask, what do you want to make sure that we know about college attainment in this northwestern part of the Commonwealth that you don't think we know? Like, is there anything unique about sort of what we see as fairly low attainment levels in this part of the Commonwealth that you want to make sure that we note as we're developing a strategic plan? And then the second question is, if the goal is to increase college attainment across the Commonwealth and here in this region, what are some concrete strategies that you think we should employ as we develop our strategic plan? So we're going to turn to people in the audience. Please raise your hand if you have something to say, and Lubna will come to you. I see a hand. I see 2 hands. First hand. She's coming.
Also identify yourself as
I feel like I'm mic'd well enough.
I'm Lance Hummer from the Keystone Community Education Council. And the one thing I noticed in the previous slide is that the community education councils have not been included And here in the northwest part of the state, that's where the largest group of community education councils are, which are funded through the Department of Education. And we coordinate a lot of services so that the rural people in the rural areas have the opportunity. And I think that that needs to be addressed because they are an integral part of the higher education perspective.
So your suggested strategy is what? To better incorporate community education councils in the plans for increasing attainment?
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you. Got you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Donna Cooper, and I'm from Children First, which is based in southeastern PA. So I flew here from Philly, and I'm glad to be in Northwest PA. It is beautiful. But I did so because I couldn't make the earlier hearings, and I wanted to really respond to some opportunities in the plan as it relates to aligning a little bit along the lines of the prior speaker, but as it relates to the career tech ed system. So I hope you don't mind. I made a few comments. They'll be brief, but you know, right now, only 7% of the state's high school kids takes career tech ed. And a lot of times it's because their parents don't believe that taking CTE courses will enable them to go to higher ed. And therefore, they encourage their kids not to go that route, even though it's a fast pathway between high school CTE and post-secondary training. And I think this plan has the potential to increase the confidence that parents have in having their kids take advantage of CTE if you make some specific policy changes. So I urge you to think about creating a way where the post-secondary system and the high school CTE system have aligned course content so that the pathways are very quick, perhaps creating an intermediary that efficiently manages industry hubs that across the post-secondary and the K-12 system align content and make sure that the least amount of college courses that are necessary happen after high school, and as much as possible, those courses are happening in high school. And I also think that there's a big opportunity to think about CTE courses, and when I say that, I mean whether it's dual enrollment that's applied, traditional Perkins funded, or apprenticeship programs, where there are courses that are being taken by kids that are rigorous enough for college credit. And I would hope that this board would think about how do you look at the high priority occupations, inventory the courses that could be college credit, meritorious or get college credit, make that happen so that more kids graduate high school from CTE with credits and they can enter into the post-secondary system and graduate with their credential more quickly. And then one other thing I hope that you will think about is that CTE programs, again, all three kinds, have work-based learning in them. And we don't really have yet a system that defines qualities for work-based learning and accredits them, whether it's in the higher ed or the secondary ed space. And often it's the same employers working in the community colleges or the 4 years or the CTEs offering work-based learning. So how do we work with those employers to make sure they're really quality and that they are getting the credit so that work-based learning counts towards the credential in the post-secondary system? I have a few more thoughts, but I want to give people a chance to speak, and maybe I'll come back.
Thank you, Donna. And a lot of what you're talking about is actually directly relevant to affordability too, because the shorter the amount of time to the credential, the less expensive it's going to be. More comments? There we go.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Ron Cole. I'm the president of Allegheny College in Meadville and Crawford County. And you asked the question of what might we want to share about our region. In Crawford County, 1 in 4 people work in manufacturing. We have roughly 600 manufacturing companies of ranging sizes in our region. One of the larger is in our town, Accutech Precision Aerospace. There's probably not a Boeing or Airbus commercial plane that doesn't have an Accutech part. We produce in our region an extraordinary level of technology, through technology, produced an extraordinary level of materials, parts, supplies for aerospace, for automotive, and so on. I'm not sure how widely known that is. And what we're trying to do at Allegheny is find ways to connect, to be part of the workforce development needs. So we launched a new facility that has workforce development training. And we're doing that, trying to find funding and work through the existing structures within accreditors, within the State Department of Higher Education. My suggestion would be to think of the work that we're doing as not higher education and technology or industry, but as an ecosystem, finding willing partners in industry to share with higher education needs, to break down assumptions, not assuming that higher education can't deliver. But I would encourage fostering opportunities for those conversations to happen between industry and the board and others in higher ed, because my experience has been that isn't often the case.
Right.
And when we've had those conversations, it's really opened doors of opportunity. So I applaud the goals. I think they're exactly right for repositioning higher education in the Commonwealth and changing the narrative of how higher education is perceived. Sitting next to Chris Gray from the Erie County Community College, and I know that there's opportunities for partnerships among us as well.
Right.
And I would, again, my suggestion is to encourage partnerships between our institutions, incentivize it with funding opportunities through the state, through the Commonwealth.
Great. Thank you so much for that comment. I think we have one more in the room, and then I think we have a few virtual comments.
Good afternoon, Adam Johnson, Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. Two quick things. One, I would ask that we recognize that there is a rural regional college or a regional college in Pennsylvania. We are one of one, but we're listed even on the map. I believe we were listed as a community college, which we are not in the community college system. So one thing I would ask is that the rural or the regional college be acknowledged as being a separate institution type within the Commonwealth. Number two, and I've heard from several colleagues here, the partnerships. In Lance up here, we partner with him on several apprenticeships. We talk about credential attainment. Apprenticeships obviously lead to the attainment of credentials and provide a pathway for work. The non-credit workforce development, which I'm primarily involved with, and we see a lot more enrollments in workforce development than we do on the academic side. However, even though they're non-credit, they can transfer to credit, both in our institution, other institutions as well, as long as they're industry recognized credentials. So I think we need to also understand that there is that pathway. It's not simply from high school to academics. There could be a pathway in there with the non-credit training and industry recognized credentials into the workforce. So
Thank you for that. I know there's a lot of interest in the whole notion of pathways and different ways for, people to get to the credentials that they're looking for. Allie, let's turn to some online virtual comments.
So if you're online and you'd like to make a comment, you can do so by raising your virtual hand on the Teams platform. If you're calling in on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *5. So I'll call on remote callers in the order that you appear, and please do begin with your name and affiliation. I'm not seeing any hands at the moment, but we invite you throughout the course of this town hall hearing to please do register your comment remotely by raising your hand.
Great. There's one more comment back here.
Amanda Hetrick, Forest Area School District, Warren Forest Higher Board of High Ed, Northern Pennsylvania Regional College, former board member, State Board of Education member. So I'm tied into a lot of these different systems, and one of the common themes that no one has mentioned in this room today anyway, as far as credential attainment, is the difficulty that our people have in accessing those. And I simply mean that transportation is a constant challenge in rural communities, and I feel like that needs to be part of what the board is thinking about, is how do we overcome the challenge of transportation. Childcare is another situation in Forest County. Where I work, there are no childcare centers. We started a K-4 program just so kids would have early education as a public school district because we felt that kids needed an opportunity. Those things just aren't in existence in a lot of our area, and so I really think those are very, very important. And then on the other end of things, working with the high school kids, I would say that many of them are scared to death to borrow money, to go on, because they're afraid that they're going to ruin their lives if they owe all this money when they get done and can't get the job that they want to have. So we really need to educate more, I think, about opportunities and methods of paying as we think about increasing affordability. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue to our second goal, which is ensuring affordable pathways to post-secondary credentials. We had the opportunity to speak with some faculty and staff at Penn West yesterday, and one of them said that this is the most fundamentally important goal of all, because if we can't figure out a way to make college affordable, then we're never going to be able to increase attainment, meet workforce goals, all of that. I think all these goals are important, but I thought that was a really important perspective, sort of centers how important affordability is in the Commonwealth. And there's lots of different things that we can do to address affordability. Of course, we can keep tuition down, we can increase financial aid, but as Donna was pointing out, we can also expand dual credit so that people can be graduating from high schools. You know, in some states, students graduate from high school with an associate's degree at no cost to them. You know, so thinking about different ways to address affordability in the Commonwealth is really important to us. For this reason, we are the second most expensive state in the nation in which to go to college. And the average student who graduates with a credential, never mind people who leave before they graduate with $40,000 in debt. And I think if you were to walk down the street and ask anybody, what do you think about college? You know, what's your thinking about college? Everybody's going to point to affordability. That is the thing that people talk about the most in the Commonwealth and really kind of across the country. But it makes it difficult. People think that the risk is really high to go to college in Pennsylvania. So what are we going to do to address that? As I said, we have over 1 million people who have some college, no degree. So we don't know exactly why they all left. Oftentimes affordability is a thing. People start to get afraid as they're accumulating debt. So then they're like, I can't accumulate any more debt. So now I'm going to leave college. So now I have debt, but I don't even have a credential that's going to get me a better job. That's a dynamic that exists. That's a real dynamic in Pennsylvania and across the country. The other thing that's really important is, remember I talked about that demographic cliff. We have an overall fewer number of high school students that are going to be graduating over the next 10 years or so. We're also seeing a pattern where the percentage of high school graduates that choose to enroll in college is also dropping. So we're going to have a smaller overall number and then a smaller percentage of that overall number that is electing to go to college. So that is creating an attainment problem. That is creating a workforce problem. That's a major issue. And finally, we know nationally that 38% of high school graduates who haven't gone to college or earned a degree or credential say that cost and debt was a major reason. So we have a major problem with affordability in the Commonwealth, unfortunately. There's many more data points I could put in front of you, but I think those are the most important ones because I think they really crystallize for us just how significant the problem is. And the question then becomes, is there something in particular about affordability that we need to know about Northwestern PA? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. I'd love to hear from you. But more broadly, what should the Commonwealth do to make college more affordable? What are the strategies that you think we should employ? And I'm going to stop there and open it up for comments. Ms. Cooper?
I'm prepared for this goal. Thank you for the opportunity. Both in terms of affordability and efficiency of tax dollars, I think that the current student aid program sort of pays out larger sums of money to cover costs in private colleges And those schools are wonderful. I went to them for both undergrad and graduate. But comparatively, we could get more students into college if we were using limited state aid dollars more efficiently by enabling greater tuition and total cost support for attending state system and community colleges. So I think we have our funds for aid are inverted in a way that is most inefficient and costs the most for each student we end up supporting at the state. Also, as was said, parents and students think college is extremely unaffordable, so they don't even try to go. So there's this like black box. What's the total cost? Tuition, room and board, fees. And also, what's the student aid available, both from the state and from the university in terms of scholarship? And you can't really see that. And I keep thinking in 2025, there ought to be a website where you could see every college and all costs in and all aid available. And then also, like, what is the salary by department upon graduation and 10 years later? So you have costs, you have benefits, and you have return on investment. We ought to be able to see that so that students and parents can like make informed decisions and also remove some of the sticker shock that they think is there. But once they understand what's inside and what they can get, it might diminish that and increase the degree to which people complete programs or choose new programs.
Thank you. So that really points to transparency and data. More information made available in a way that people can consume it.
Hi, I'm Chris Gray with the Newer Community College just here in Erie County. So Dr. Shaw, I apologize. You've heard me beat this drum before, but one thing unique about Northwest is in the Community College Act, which I understand we're not going to get changes to the act, there's a 1, 2, and 3 times tuition. So if I literally go 5 miles south of here, a student doesn't have access to the community college system at the same cost point. I think that probably made sense in the 60s when community colleges were being built and it was local tax dollars were being used to support that. I don't think that makes sense for the direction we're going. So the strategy I think we could use for that, and I don't know how that applies in the other sectors. I know PASHE has a different set of rules and state related have their own rules as well. I would recommend that we look at direction from PDE to our independent auditors. So for instance, the auditors just randomly pick what they choose out of that Chapter 35 to audit. If they were directed by PDE and given importance what's important to the state, I think that would be a way for those of us that could say, I can take a student at Corey High School who could be from one of 3 counties and offer them the same price point that we can offer to students of Erie County. And really where that matters, and I think you know this, but Jamestown Community College literally sits out of New York, sits just across the border, and they actively recruit from this whole region. And they charge New York in-district rates. So for me to get someone from New York or Ohio, in my model, I would have to charge them 3 times tuition, which no longer makes it affordable.
Right, so that's another issue that kind of crosses goals, because we hear repeatedly, especially for colleges that are along the border, that our border states are stealing our students because they have, you know, the Excelsior program, let's say, in New York, which gives you free college if you say that you will stay in New York. That's really attractive. We don't have programs like that here. But what Chris is referring to is that community colleges charge differential tuition rates by law regarding whether or not the student comes from a sponsoring county, because community colleges, unlike any other sector, get local funds. So that has been a long-standing issue, and I appreciate you bringing it up because it's one way of addressing affordability, and it's one of the reasons why we're ranked so low in affordability, because our community colleges by law have to charge double tuition and then triple tuition if they come in from out of state. Thank you.
So I'm at the back of the room.
Oh, there's one.
I don't want to favor one side or the other.
Hello, Paul Taylor. I serve as the president at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. I couldn't get to the Southwest, so I decided to come and take a trip.
Congratulations on the new pope.
Thank you very much. Leo's a good guy, so we're praying for him. Two pieces. One, I think FIA is an important instrument to help our students in the FIA grant. And since the FIA grant eligibility is determined more by the FAFSA form and the student's income level, it's important that we afford those students the ability to choose their school and to take the money with them and increasing the FIA grant is important to go across all parts of our sector, especially as students are looking at graduation rates at members of the sector. There are certain sectors of higher education that have better graduation rates, and I think those students would choose those. And I would recommend that the FIA grant be raised, and we look at how the money can follow the student so that the student can choose their program. Many programs are not offered at every university. And so for them to be able to choose an independent community college, state-related across the board, or regional college, which is a new sector we heard today, I think it's important that the money follow the student. Second, with the directives coming from the federal government and the move to push back to the states the responsibilities for education, what are the ways in which we're trying to raise more money in Pennsylvania or get more money from the feds to funnel through the state to take care of our students? Thank you.
If you have ideas about where that money should come from, feel free to mention them right now.
Yeah, I know we're all in the same boat, but I wanted to bring it to the fore that we're facing we're all facing that issue. Thank you.
And you know, I want to recognize that we have a lot going on at the federal level. A lot of that stuff is we're still waiting to see how it's going to settle. But the way I feel about what's happening in Pennsylvania is we got to get our own house in order. We've got a lot to do that's specific to Pennsylvania. And then as the federal government does what the federal government is going to do, we will adjust. And our higher ed leaders are already doing that. But the role of the board is really to kind of set the course for Pennsylvania, understanding that there is instability coming from the federal level, but knowing that we will outlive that instability. And, you know, this is a strategic plan that's supposed to be in place for 10 years. Where do we want to be in 10 years? How can we get there? So thanks for bringing that up.
Pope Leo XIV is a graduate of a
Villanova.
Pennsylvania college, Villanova, one of the independents. So he's one of us. So.
Okay, we have an online comment.
Okay, we have an online comment.
Okay. Ms. McSweeney, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm driving at the moment from Pittsburgh to Central Pennsylvania. I'm Molly McSweeney from the Pennsylvania Council for International Education Board President. And I just wondered, I'm not from Pennsylvania originally, although I went to college here and have lived here for a while now. And I see a real opportunity in Pennsylvania with all the higher education institutions, although we have a very low rankings for affordability and accessibility. I hope you can hear me. Let me know if you can't.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. With this demographic cliff being such a reality, and accessibility and affordability, and this economic strategy that we now have after a decade of not having one in Pennsylvania, I see this real opportunity with potentially international students and scholars who fuel our economy and come here and pay out-of-state tuition. Just wild, considering all that they contribute. I think it's over $2 billion to the Pennsylvania economy, as well as refugees, honestly, because the reality is there are just more and more of them in Pennsylvania, not to be an economic drain, but they fuel also our workforce development. So maybe thinking outside the box in that way, I wonder what you might have to say about that being an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more affordability strategies? Big problem? No? We also have a survey that you can fill out and give us more thinking on any of these goals. So I'm going to go to economic development now, which, as Cindy said, is a critically important element of the Commonwealth's ecosystem, and higher education in really strong states is put right in the middle of economic development. So the Department of Community and Economic Development published a strategic plan and acknowledged the central role that higher education plays in economic development. So when we're talking about economic development, we're talking about seeding innovation and bringing in new, companies and industries, and then ensuring that we have the talent to attract them in and to keep them in the Commonwealth. So when we think about economic development, it's to us a very forward-looking goal. How do we make Pennsylvania attractive to the kinds of companies and businesses and employers that pay high wages for folks and that will enrich the economic prosperity of the Commonwealth? In this strategic plan that DCED published, they specifically call out the need for a strong, effective, and efficient system of higher education, to reinvest in higher education, and to make college more affordable to Pennsylvanians. So we were delighted to see this in the plan because we believe that higher education should be right in the middle of economic development. And then there's other elements of the strategic plan that are also important, but I think one of the things that's really important is if you watch Governor Shapiro, what you will see is he is consistently focused on economic development. He is consistently talking about all the ways in which his administration is trying to create a friendly environment for new businesses. And oftentimes we're competing with other states for these good jobs and for these companies. And one of the things we know when we look at other states who are really good at this, like a state like Virginia, for example, we know that overall the attainment level tends to be high. So these companies look around and they want to locate in places where the talent level is already there or close to where they'd like it to be. There's also, in these kinds of states, the fact that the skills and talents are aligned not just to today's economy, but to tomorrow's economy as well. An ecosystem, a higher ed ecosystem that's actually responsive to the workforce development needs of companies. That's critically important. Can we be nimble enough? If a company is looking around, regarding where it's going to settle, can we, with good faith, say, we can respond to your workforce development needs? Our higher education sector can do that for you. Incentives to innovate, to make sure that as innovations occur in our, universities, that they stay here. And finally, just a really strong alignment between higher education and economic development efforts so that in these strong states, they are not siloed in different agencies, but they're actually working across agencies to create a strong and comprehensive approach to economic development. So we know from what these other states do, we know where we're going. This is where we need to go. But how do we get there? So I know there's a lot of economic development going on in the, northwest region of the state. Are there things that we should know about economic development efforts here? And then again, what are the strategies you think we can employ to better align our higher education sector with the economic development needs of the Commonwealth? Is it tied to a strategy? Okay.
I'll give you an example because it really is this type of strategy. What has happened is we have been doing dual enrollment for about 10 years. And that was where we brought in a community college and we're able to do certificate training in welding. And just recently, Franklin, PA, brought in a new welding company. And the reason that they came was because they found out that there was a pool of people that had that kind of a credential. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the connection with economic development, mm-hmm. is that you are training to the needs that are there, and companies find out that there is a pool that they can draw on. And that just happened, that we were told that. It's a program we had been working on, and it fits in with the previous goal too, is using dual enrollment as a way of getting people to have that career background, and it fits in with the economic development.
Right. So one of the things about economic and workforce development is, so we're the State Board of Higher Education, and our job is to try to set kind of a policy table, like how do we create an environment that's going to seed the kind of work that you did. Also knowing though that regionally we have really different economies. We have different reasons that, new companies would come into northwestern Pennsylvania versus say southeastern. So there's this sort of balance between what's the statewide set of policies that, or incentives that might be put in place? And then how do we incentivize regions to work together to increase their attractiveness or increase the ability of the state to bring in companies and employers to their region? So that's one of the things where we really have to try to figure that out.
Okay, this will be the last one, but it's exactly on that point. So yes, we need to do things at a regional level, but government systems also have to align to make that happen. And the example on welding and the dual enrollment was a perfect example of why I think the plan needs to ensure that as we create these regional constellations to come up with and implement strategies that connect post-secondary and workforce demand needs, that they include intentionally the employer advisory committees that are set up for the CTE programs and the credential programs that are happening at the local level. We already have a very dynamic system. We toured 16 CTEs, most of them in the western part of the state over here, and their employer engagement is very intense and very real-time and dynamic. And so that offers a platform on which to build from the other examples that the community colleges have and the secondary institutions have. And I hope that when we think about this, we'll think about including both the secondary and the post-secondary dynamic workforce venues and bring them together so that we don't create a bifurcated system, because that's going to streamline credential completion and efficiency, because everything will be aligned as kids start in high school and finish in college. And I would close by saying that the Strata Foundation nationally has done some extraordinary work really inventorying how states are looking at this. And they have something called the Opportunity Index. And I would encourage the board to think about how they learn from that and the other states, including Virginia, but the research that Strata is doing to really help states create rational systems that really do that kind of alignment.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that we know about Pennsylvania is in many ways we're sort of at the tail end of the pack on many of our goals. But the good news about that is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. When we can find states that have already created models for addressing some of these goals, we can look to those and we can think about how they might be adopted in Pennsylvania. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing with the state board once we, collect all this information, is actually going out and saying, okay, who does this the best? Can we talk to them? Can we adopt that model in Pennsylvania? More economic development ideas. There's a hand up over here.
Having been in education for 37 years, I will tell you that one of the things that I don't love about it is that there are a lot of rules, there are a lot of regulations, and it's very hard to innovate and make change and respond sometimes to things that are going on in your communities. And my example is going to be K-12 because that's my world, but we received legislation that we would have a school police officer or a school resource officer in every district. I have a very small district. I'm 2 miles from the state police station. Does it make sense for me to invest in that, or does it make sense for me to use my resources someplace else? But there is not a process for me to really protest that. I can get a waiver temporarily while I work on it, but I can't explain that I don't really need that and what I do need. So as you develop the plan, I would really strongly encourage you to include opportunities for pilot programs, for those innovative strategies that you want to see people try, because people have a lot of ideas. And a lot of times they just hear the word no. And so we need to be open and we need to be willing to allow people to experiment and fail sometimes, but maybe succeed more often. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that comment.
I think one of the great examples in Northwest Pennsylvania for both collaboration and focus on how higher ed connects to economic development is also focusing on small business development and the Innovation Beehive Network, where you have Penn West Edinburgh, Allegheny College, Penn State Behrend, Gannon University, Mercyhurst University, and our public library system all working together to support small business development based on our strengths. It not only gives us the opportunity for experiential learning for our students, but working with real life clients in their communities. But it's a great solution, especially in rural communities where maybe it's not the opportunity to bring in a large employer, but it's how do we create new growth in our communities. And it's been a wonderful model. There's been many discussions in Northwest PA about how do we expand this even further. But I think it's something that you should look at.
Can you tell us who you are and who you are affiliated
Sure, I'm
with?
sorry. Amanda Sissom with Penn West Edinboro.
Okay, got it. So what you're describing is a collaborative relationship between multiple higher ed institutions from multiple sectors with small businesses to address the business's workforce development needs?
Sorry. To address their development needs. So whether it's their needs to learn more about how to market and brand their small business, how to grow their small business so they can employ additional.
So this model draws on the expertise that exists in the higher ed institutions to help support and grow the small businesses.
Correct. And we're all using our strengths. So here on our campus, we focus on strategic branding and communications, but at Behrend, they're helping to build prototypes. And at Gannon, they're working on your overall business planning. And so it's really calling on the strengths of all of us to work very collaboratively, which we don't have a lot of other examples on how we do that. We're working very collaboratively to serve the community and to grow jobs organically in our communities.
That is a really great example. We're going to follow up with you to get more information about that, because our job is to try to figure out if you can do it here, how can we seed that in other places? And there are other places in the Commonwealth where you see collaboration, but what you don't see is like, systemically, coordination pops up in some places and not in others. So thank you for that. More ideas about economic development? Allie, are there any online?
No hands, but we certainly welcome any online commenters to raise your hand.
Okay, I'm going to move on to workforce development because it is so closely aligned to economic development. And we're defining the workforce development needs of the Commonwealth as the post-secondary skills and credentials that we need to fill current jobs and those that are likely to exist in the future, absent any huge disruption in the economy, which is, the economy gets disrupted all the time, but we're working with data that comes from labor and industry that helps us really understand where our workforce gaps are, what we're looking for. So in 2023, we published a study that showed, well, this was in 2024, but that showed that in 2023, we had about 61,000 jobs in the Commonwealth that we could not fill with Commonwealth higher education graduates because we weren't producing enough higher education graduates to fill these jobs. And when we talk about that, we're talking about any kind of post-secondary credential. So at that point in time, that snapshot, there were 61,000 jobs we couldn't fill. We also asked that this be forecasted into the future. What happens if we don't do anything? What's going to happen to this post-secondary workforce credential gap? It's going to grow to over 218,000. So if we do not figure out how to fill the workforce needs of the companies that we currently have, the employers we have in the Commonwealth, then we are going to see an increasing level of jobs that we cannot fill because our post-secondary credential production doesn't match what our employers are looking for. That's a very significant problem for us. We also were able to do a look regionally to see what kind of workforce credential gaps existed. And what we found, you sort of across this map that the biggest gap, of course, is in the Southeast, which is correlated to the sheer number of jobs that are in that part of the Commonwealth. And we see that the Northwest is among the lowest. And about 20% of your jobs in this region, we can't fill because we're not producing credentials that are aligned with these jobs. But we can dig even deeper, and I'm just going to give you a snapshot of a few different kinds of data that we can use when we're thinking about how to fill these workforce gaps. So this is an interesting slide because what it shows you is that the vast majority of credentials that the economy in the Northwest needs are actually at the associate level and below. That doesn't mean that our bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees should stop We still need bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees, but this is where we're missing the credentials. This is where, when you look at what kinds of jobs are available, what kinds of skills and credentials are needed, and what we're producing, this is our biggest gap. If you go to other parts of the Commonwealth, you see this inverted. Like in the southeastern part of the state, in Philadelphia, you see the vast majority of credential gap is from bachelor's degrees, which, sort of aligns with the kinds of jobs that are there. But here we have an associate's and sort of sub-associate's credential problem. We can also use data to understand exactly what fields those gaps exist in. And here you see in this part of the Commonwealth, healthcare is a major issue. You also see managerial, business, and professional office jobs. That's true in every part of the Commonwealth, that second one. And in some parts of the Commonwealth, that's the biggest gap. But healthcare shows up everywhere. Education tends to show up as well. So we can begin to do really granular analysis, like what exact credentials are needed for these jobs and where might they come from? Who's producing them? And if we're not producing enough of them, how can we collaborate together to make sure that we have the credentials that are going to fill those gaps? And the other reason this is important is because there's a broad interest, I think, in making sure that people have the wherewithal to stay in the communities that they live in and want to raise their children in, so that they don't have to leave rural communities because the credentials that are available to them don't match the jobs that are available. So this is really important for the well-being of our rural communities, in addition to the fact that, workforce development is important to the entire state. So I'm going to stop there on workforce development. It's a really rich topic. Is there stuff that we need to know, again, about the northwest part of the state? Sorry, I messed up there. And what strategies we should use to begin to address the workforce development goals, knowing that the biggest gap that we have is actually in the associates and short-term credential areas. Sure.
Thank you. I know we talked a lot about affordability in some of the other goals, and I think affordability also carries over to these short-term certificates and the funding mechanisms for these short-term programs. Yeah. It's kind of all over the place. And so maybe one of the strategies is to collaborate or align with Department of Labor and Industry, DCED, when we talk about WEDNET funding, and then WIOA on the L&I side, and how we can maybe better align all of those funding programs to make it easier for them to access funding, because each one has its own different set of guidelines and rules and regulations. And it's tough for somebody outside that doesn't understand all that to be able to navigate and find out, where do I go for these funding opportunities. So that might be one strategy, to get all the players on board with all of those different funding programs and be able to maybe even provide resources that are easier to understand or better align the goals of what we're trying to accomplish.
We are fortunate that we have a Secretary of Labor and Industry sitting on our board, and that we also have a Director of Economic and Workforce Development that comes from that world. And so we talk all the time about breaking down those silos, the information silos, but also the funding streams. Where is there's money. How do we make sure that the money is used in the most effective ways possible to begin to address some of these issues? So I appreciate your comment. And right next to you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm with the Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. We serve 10 very rural communities, and we find that, or counties, and all of these rural communities within these counties have a different need, right? So being nimble is what we do, and we go to those businesses and we're developing what they need on their floors. But the challenge is, sometimes when we're talking like the flow of goal 1 through 4, the funding structure, and we're talking about blowing up that idea of traditional associate and bachelor's degrees, and it's like micro credentials, right? So a set of 3 classes. Those often don't qualify for funding anywhere. So if the business is not in a split place to be able to fund the employees don't have a way, because the poverty level is very high. So when a class is $800, that is a choice between feeding their family and taking a class, they're going to feed their family. So in order to make these micro-credentials and all of these things accessible to the people of Northwest Pennsylvania, what we've learned is that we have to find a different way of getting these types of things funded. So for instance, you know, we saw a big decline of volunteer firefighters, and my friend Adam here, like huge kudos. We did partnerships in the 10 counties and ran free EMT classes to try to fill those gaps. But that's not going to make us sustainable, right? So how do we bridge that is one of the challenges, and I'm not sure where that lies. If it's getting community partners, you know, on board with your initiative, so it's not just education versus the community. It's how to get those communities to buy in that this is part of their economic sustainability.
Thank you. And, you know, one of the things we see some of this in Pennsylvania, we see a lot of this in other states, is the employers themselves putting money on the table. How do people feel about that as one way to begin to overcome the barriers that exist to meeting the needs of employers? I know there's employers in the Commonwealth who do exactly that. They'll pay for labs because they need nurses, and they'll pay a premium to get nursing faculty because we know how hard it is to do that, because nurses get paid so much more outside of, you know, teaching than they would if they came into a college. And then they guarantee people jobs. What do you think about that as part of a model, sort of like everybody's got some skin in the game kind of model to address workforce development needs? People like, people not like?
Thank you. This is incredibly encouraging to hear some of these examples. And to follow up on what you just asked, again, Ron Cole from Allegheny College, we're trying things that we've never done before at an independent college. And we started to offer non-credit bearing workshops based on a year and a half of listening to our manufacturing base in our region. What are their needs? So the NPRC model of being nimble is critically important to meet those needs, not to assume what's needed and provide a structure, but instead listen to what the manufacturers, the employers are looking for, and then try to see where we could help meet those needs. The funding stream is critically important. And to your point about connecting with corporate partners or businesses, yeah, we need to figure out how to dismantle assumptions and barriers to enable that. We're also looking, I think there's opportunity with foundation support locally. We have our Crawford County Technical School, Crawford Tech. We're looking at partnering with them with dual enrollment programs and with potential foundation support. But going back to what Father Paul mentioned earlier about some of the state funding, the FIA grants, I would love to see those broaden up in opportunity for other, to provide more flexibility on how they're applied, but funnel more money into those programs, giving the students the choice for where they apply those grants, including to what I hear from our friends at NPRC and what we're doing for workforce development. That's a stumbling block, and we heard earlier, transportation, childcare are also critical factors in our rural communities that are huge barriers. We have more probably underemployment than unemployment. We need to help residents find more livable wage career paths. So we need entry point and then upskilling education. It would be wonderful to find structures at the state level to help those individuals and those families find those entry points.
Thank you. I think you're speaking both about like stackable credentials, but also helping people understand what those options might be. Because it's very hard for people to know, if I want to get here, what are my interim steps to get there? You know, if I can't afford to go to college full-time for 4 years, how do I move along that career path? Yes, you, and then John.
I should give my boss the microphone first.
Uh-oh. Don't fire him.
I'm Jim Geiger at Penn West University. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to reframe some of the EITC funding on the outbound side. It's great for scholarships coming in, but that could be a way to incentivize companies and graduates to get jobs and go to those companies.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's a great idea. Mr. President.
Jim has great ideas all the time. I concur with him. I'm John Anderson, President of Penn West here, and I think this goal frames the real dilemma that higher education leaders have today. Because on one side, we're evaluated all the time on traditional metrics, that first-time, full-time freshman cohort, graduation rates, but yet the real demand is in high-risk populations that cause us to stretch us academically into areas we haven't been before and increase our physical geography scope. We've got to reach into communities, reach populations with programs that we typically are not comfortable with. And so the strategy, I think, has to be coming up with metrics that not only measure how successful is the traditional population, but how are we measuring how much an institution reaches into its mission in its area of Pennsylvania and how much it fulfills that mission. Mm-hmm. Those metrics over the next few decades are going to be so much more important and really get the heart of what Pennsylvania is trying to do. And if we can find metrics that drive people and drive institutions to say, we're going to evaluate you, and we welcome the accountability on how many communities you're helping, how many alternative populations you're serving. Mm-hmm. If we can measure institutions by that and the dollars flow, then we'll be able to make a difference in the metric.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for saying that, because as you're pointing out, mostly higher ed institutions, when they're evaluated on really concrete metrics of what we call student success. But I think what you're pointing to is like metrics of community contribution or return on investment or value added to a community. So that becomes like a broader metric that can be measured in lots of different ways. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather Evans. I'll put on my manufacturer's hat. I work in human resources at Port Erie Plastics. We're a manufacturing company in Harbor Creek. So I think you asked, like, would employers be interested in contributing to the funding? Yes. Mm-hmm. So of course.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I mean,
that's all we need to know.
That's our only option. We definitely invest. We do. Nobody's coming with the skill sets we need, right? So some barriers that we face. One would be that we will hire someone and be more than happy to train them, but then we're taking them away from the actual job, itself being done. So we don't have enough staff is an issue. We go for grants all the time as employers, but my job is HR. Grant writing's, a job in of itself. Yeah. Employers do not have the time and resources to apply for funding. It's massive for us to request and keep on top of that. It would be a part-time to full-time job for most of us. We also have third shift. That's a huge issue for us. There's, somebody that works 8 hours and then doesn't want to go to training again, so that's a barrier. And we also have the stigma that folks that didn't go to school after high school, they don't want to go back because they didn't say, they will say, I wasn't good at school or I wasn't good in math, so I don't want to do it again. So there's a lot of fear to convince someone that they want to go back to school. So I think employers are on the exact same page as everybody in this room, that we want to make our employees successful and have the skills, but there's a lot of barriers for us on that side.
So are there ways you would suggest, strategies that you would suggest, incentives, things that would help you overcome some of those barriers?
I know in some cases, some of the places I've worked with, Lanson, I work with MPRC, they'll start with intro classes again to build confidence, maybe start with like a basics in math class to build their confidence that they can get through this. The hard thing is a lot of the institutions are far away. We need people on site, that could come into our facilities so our team doesn't have to leave. Transportation, like that's been mentioned a few times, is a very, very big issue for us. So any kind of support we could have on that side would be helpful.
Thank you.
Caller, Ms. Lundy, you should be able to unmute and offer your comments, please.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Lundy. I'm with Gannon University, and it's not exactly on the goal but I think it relates that innovation is essential for continuing to offer higher education programs that do meet the employer demands, right? If we're trying to create a workforce of the future, we need to be able to offer the academic programs of the future. And we've been fortunate in Pennsylvania to be able for higher education to launch new academic programs very efficiently, led by the institutions and not subject to any sort of bureaucratic or rigorous investigation. In other neighboring states, some of those boards of education actually throw it out and allow people to object to new programs being started at an institution. And so I bring it up here because I think it's really important that we view the opportunity to meet the workforce demand through an innovation lens rather than a protectionist or bureaucratic lens. So I want to just throw the strategy of making sure that whatever parameters and objectives this board chooses to do in the future, that we don't shut down the opportunities for our really innovative institutions in Pennsylvania. While we may be high cost, right, we are a place, we're a destination as a state and as a country within bringing students to the U.S. Again, and we bring students from all over the world here. And so needing to be able to approve those programs that meet those demands and draw the students in is really essential. Thank you.
Okay.
Work with a lot of manufacturing. And one of the things that we're not talking about is that really that incumbent worker. And that's what manufacturing is saying, that they need the training for the incumbent worker because they have a lot of people that are retiring out and they don't have employees who have the skill. Young people don't have the skill coming in. And so there needs to be a great deal of help with that incumbent worker.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Carrie DeChurch from Department of Labor and Industry. So I'm hearing all these buzzwords from different areas, and it seems like that there are things that we've been talking about for 18 months. Micro-credentialing, partnering, incumbent worker. I know the state is working on an incumbent worker policy. So once we have that policy, we can seek additional funding to provide those trainings to help uplift, and train those entry-level workers, to open up spots to bring in more entry-level workers and get them up. So I think we really need to make a concerted effort to bring all the people to the table. Great. And that's DCED, the employers, labor and industry, everybody to really hone down into what programs can we offer. And the schools need to be flexible as well, and to say, okay, we will make these little clusters of micro-credentials to satisfy the larger employer needs in the area. So.
And I think those meetings, they have to be data-driven. Like, we have to understand what we're looking at and how together we can solve them. So I appreciate that, the need to get across the silos. Okay. Shall we move on? Okay. This goal is one of the duties of the State Board of Higher Education, which is to ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. And it's important for lots of different reasons. One of the reasons is that, not just in Pennsylvania, but everywhere, people are questioning the value of higher education. They're questioning the need for higher education. There's a drop in confidence about the utility of a credential. And as the cost goes up, there's also questions about how those resources, many of which are being provided by the state, are being used. And so that creates a difficult situation for us in the Commonwealth when we know that we're actually a pretty low resourced higher education sector compared to most other states. And so the notion here is to increase transparency, increase what we're calling accountability, so that people understand the value of higher education. They can clearly see what higher education is delivering, and we can utilize data in a way that we've never utilized data before in the Commonwealth. We have, I'll go to the next slide. We have a lot of different data that's being collected by all of our higher ed institutions. We don't have a standard mechanism for showing how resources provide a return on investment. That is to our detriment. We can't show people consistently how the resources that the state is spending are being used to strengthen the state. Different sectors report different kinds of data, but they're not common oftentimes. And so you're looking at apples and oranges rather than being able to look across the sector. And there are national data systems that have consistently collected common data elements. Those data systems are being threatened at the national level, at the federal level. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with those data systems, but those have been data systems that many states, all states have relied on to understand higher education, and they're being threatened. So we face a problem in terms of transparency or even evidence-based decision-making about sort of where we might best invest our money or where we might best create policy that's going to strengthen the sector. So the question again is, for you all, what might some strategies be to increase transparency, to increase sort of, accountability, ways to help educate others about the work that higher education is doing? Because that really is, I think, a pretty chronic issue in the Commonwealth. And there are, plenty of conversations that occur that, start with, we already spend too much money on higher education, or higher education is not meeting our needs. I think that the truth is really very different, but what do we do to make that point, to demonstrate the value and to make better decisions or make strong decisions as possible about how state resources are spent? I know this isn't as exciting as some of the other goals, but it is really important. Yeah. I mean, another thing to think about too is not just about data, right? But like, how do we use it? Like, how do we use it to communicate? Because we are awash in data, but the trick is how do we display it? How do we use it to tell a story? Those are other challenges I think that we face. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's right where I was headed actually, in terms of, as you track your metrics of students who graduate from an institution, where are they going to work? We have to report that as K-12s. We have so many going to the military, we have so many going to industry, we have so many going to four-year college. Have higher education institutions report where they're working after they finish the credential or the associate's degree or whatever, and then look at what the average salary is for that sector. And now that they're making $50,000, what percentage of that comes out in your taxes and is actually paying for their own education or for the education of your child? And I think just telling the story and showing the increase in income for people based on their higher education or their credential attainment will help to tell the story.
So that's a strategy to directly link employment outcomes and potentially wage outcomes to credential attainment. Nobody? Does anybody have, I guess I'm going to turn to you, John, because I know that PASHE actually is our only higher education system in the state. And it does actually have a pretty substantial data dashboard that it uses. I wonder if you can speak to sort of what the potential is there, like how that's helpful to you, how it might be helpful sort of in engaging legislators or other stakeholders.
And can I add that the PASHE Chancellor's Office and Board of Governors instituted a few years ago an accountability policy. And I can never remember what CCP stands for, but you feel your comprehensive whatever plans. Yeah, thanks. And that's also based, that's not a data issue per se, we're talking about two different things, but it is a sort of self-imposed system of accountability, at least within the PASHE system. So if you can also comment on that as to, whether or not that could be a model.
Sure, glad to. So coming in new to the system last year, I'm kind of a data geek and I really wanted information. And PASHE has done a fantastic job. I was in a conversation with Sharon Minich, the CFO for the system, when I first got here, and asked her, you know, can you tell me anything about how we compare on these metrics to other PASHE institutions? And she gave me a link with a whole set of dashboards that wasn't just the traditional iPEDS metrics, which I was talking about earlier. It's every kind of financial measure you can imagine, which allows us as a team to look and say, what is this institution doing better than we are? Let's get them on the phone, figure out how they're using this so we can replicate it. And the CPP process, if you see a group of our team who are here today, like sweating bullets, our next CPP is due May 22nd.
What does that stand for?
It's a collegiate comprehensive planning process.
Okay.
Yeah, CPP, yeah, CPP. Yeah. Yes, there. Yeah, we'll avoid that for now. But it's a document that outlines the next 3 years of how we plan to spend money in every category, how we balance the budget, and then how we recruit students, housing, all of those pieces are embedded into one document. And that level of transparency allows us as PASHE institutions to look at each other and learn from each other. And if we had that ability across all of Pennsylvania, it's not a competitive tool, it's a cooperative tool. Because we then can look and find out where centers of strength are and start the conversations, which we certainly have done that. So it's tremendously helpful. And that level of transparency brings a lot of self-accountability. And I hope that we can get that across all different sectors.
Thank you. There's a hand up in the back.
Thank you again. Paul Taylor, St. Vincent College. As we look at the measure of the worth of a degree, and if the only measure we use is starting salary or income, we're in the wrong business. We need to think in different measures. And this cuts across all of our sectors. As competitive as we are as institutions, each of us in this room, I think we need to safeguard higher education in general, and I think this is what the board is charged to do. If we denigrate the lower income degree holders, then we are denigrating early childhood educators, social workers, ministers, people who do the work of our people, and each of our institutions educate those people. We need a better measure. And if we denigrate the liberal arts, like philosophy, because we think nobody can get a job in it, then we are taking out of the pool some of the people who score the highest on the LSAT and become the best lawyers. Just because they have a philosophy degree, which may not seem to be employable with a bachelor's degree, doesn't mean that they're not going to go off and knock it out of the park in their career. We need better measures. And the financial value transparency program across the United States is undermining our ability to educate our people in a way that will advance our nation as thinkers, as citizens, and as participants in this republic. We have a responsibility to do that. And if we're reducing to the least common denominator how much they're making with a degree or certificate out of school, then we're in the wrong business. So I would advise, I would encourage us to think of other measures too.
Do you have any suggestions?
Precisely the ones I just offered, that, you know, using the successes of people from across our sectors who have done work in the liberal arts or in service or in early childhood education, where they may not be making a ton of money, but they're living happy lives, raising families, contributing to their society, contributing to their communities, and use them as measures. It's harder to measure, I'll agree. But they are good measures, and they build up our society. So if we just look at the credential and what it earns the person when they graduate, it's an insufficient measure. And for students who leave with a liberal arts education, and I'll advocate for that, a college, they'll get a great degree from their accounting degree. They'll get a great job from their accounting degree first out of college, but they'll become vice president of their firm because they're liberal arts education. There are different pieces of higher education and how it was originally founded to be in 1636 in our nation to move our educated people forward to build up our nation. It's an encouragement and a challenge, and not a criticism, but a challenge to ask us to move beyond these measures. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, please.
You know, I haven't talked at any other meeting. I don't know why I'm talkative, excuse me.
last chance,
Maybe
Cindy.
it's smiling, right, I'm getting it all off my chest now. You know, maybe there's, Father, maybe there's some kind of strategy eventually, I don't know if it's immediate, but eventually, and sooner rather than later, around the state board trying to put together some kind of consortium of higher education institutions that can do almost like a marketing effort around this. I mean, maybe that's something that the state board can take on. Our job is to convene and coordinate and to celebrate, along with meeting the challenges, to celebrate the value of higher education. And it just sort of seems to me, you know, that if there are others in the sector who are willing to come together to say, this is common cause, no matter what sector of higher education you are, from R1 to, you know, community college, et cetera. I see that as something that maybe the state board actually could take the lead on at some point.
To add to that, I believe it would be a great opportunity for us to leverage our collective alumni that came to this state, grew up in this state, got their degrees here and stayed here to work, but really coalescing around that effort to better tell the story. We've got lots of them here that could help.
Great. Any other comments? No? Okay. We are rounding, getting to home plate. Okay. This one is also, of course, really important. This has to do with strengthening the fiscal health and stability of our higher ed sector. We are charged as a State Board of Higher Education to provide assistance, not to force assistance upon institutions, but to serve as a resource for institutions that may be seeking technical assistance or other kinds of supports, tools that would help them navigate through fiscal instability. Like other states, we have institutions that are struggling for all the reasons we've already talked about. We have plenty of institutions that are exhibiting some signs of volatility and fiscal distress, and those come in different ways. We on the State Board of Higher Education do not have any inside information about higher ed institutions and their fiscal stability. What we do have, though, are public reports that might raise alarms. Like if you see an institution lay off a lot of faculty, or you hear that there's an accreditation problem. So we track those concerns, not in a punitive way, but to understand what our institutions are encountering right now, as so many things are challenging our capacity to continue to function effectively. We also know that like this whole issue and the implications of fiscal instability and potential closures and mergers really has different impacts in different parts of the Commonwealth. So if you have an area of the state that has 100 institutions and one of them closes, that's awful. But if you have a region of the state that has 15 institutions or 12 and one closes, that's really very different implication. So part of our job is to think about how, you know, when these things happen, first of all, can we help institutions navigate? And if they must close or merge, can we help them do that in an orderly way to minimize the impact on students and communities? So those are the things that, you know, our state and multiple states across the nation are really starting to try to figure out, because this is such a challenging time, and because when we have institutions close, it's a, you know, as we're watching right now, as the Penn State conversation is playing out around some of those regional Commonwealth universities that might close, it's really difficult on communities and on the students and people that work there. I just wanted to put up some of the demographic information about the counties that are in the northwestern part of the Commonwealth. in terms of the tenure percentage and changes in high school graduates. And you see that I think, except for Cameron County, and I don't understand why that one is growing. I think it's really small though, so I don't know how big the population change is, but like the projected population change of high school graduates is downward turning across pretty much every county in the northwestern region of the state, which is of course just another reason to sort of, think about, what kind of impact is this going to have on our higher ed institutions. And another thing I just want to point out is that we're basically in the bottom fifth with regard to the total amount of money that the Commonwealth spends on higher education. And that includes both direct appropriations to publicly funded institutions and to our independent institutions, and also in terms of financial aid. So this has been true for a long time. Pennsylvania has been disinvesting in higher education. And so part of what that means is that our higher education institutions may not have the safety net that other institutions might have in states that invest more heavily in higher education. And so that's just another piece of information that the Commonwealth, and this is something that the governor talked about, and I talked about last year all the time. At that point in time, by the metrics that we were using, we were 49th out of 50 states in terms of how much money we were spending in higher education. So we're a little bit farther up the food chain, but not much. And this, I think, has implications for the fiscal stability of the entire sector. So are there particular challenges in the northwestern region of the Commonwealth that we should be aware of with regard to fiscal stability, or challenges to our higher ed institutions? And what are some of the things that you think we could do that would be practical and useful to higher ed institutions as they try to navigate through some of these difficult fiscal waters?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Claster. I'm a sociologist here at Penn West, and I am the Edinburgh ABSCUF Faculty Union President. The two things that I'd like to discuss fall under the same umbrella, and it's thinking about our public universities and community colleges for exactly what they are. They're assets of the Commonwealth. And if we don't have the population that we once had, and our leaders of the past had a growth mindset, and a mindset where they were in competition with one another, then we have to change the paradigm. And so the first thing I would say is, has the board considered, and I know this is massive, looking at the $1+ trillion in institutional debt at our universities and at our community colleges? They act as an albatross around the necks of any attempt to balance our budgets. We often talk about the alpha of balancing budgets. We talk about revenue, and we talk about students, but what about debt? What about the omega? And I know we can't go back, and I know none of the people here and none of our trustees made those decisions, but we can take responsibility for it now, and we cannot harbor the future because of it. The second thing I want to think about is, if you have less students and less appropriate, or the endowments are not quite what you need them to be for the future, how can we use you're sitting on 600 acres. I don't know if you know that. And so my question is, how do we develop alternative streams of revenue? I was elated to see the legislature pass the Solar for Schools. I was super pumped that the community colleges were putting it, and I would love to see another $25 million to go towards solar for college, and start to think about how we use our already existing resources to generate revenue, build partnerships, move into the 21st century.
Thank you for both of those suggestions. What else can we do for our higher ed institutions? I hope this doesn't mean you think nothing. People think nothing? Like, some people might think, let the market do what the market's going to do. Is that sort of, do you ascribe to that?
You were talking about the instability and specifically closures, and I'm thinking of Clearfield County, for example, who Clearfield campus of Lock Haven has announced its closure. Penn State Du Bois is up in the air, but they lost Triangle Tech as well. So that could be 3 2-year or less degree granting institutions that have left just that one county in a 12-month period, potentially. And so I'm thinking, do we look at something like the Department of Labor and Industries rapid response model, where we have these closures, we have these students, we have employees, faculty, administrative staff that now are left with, what do I do? So can we create some type of similar model where we can get other institutions in that area, as well as members from the PDE, potentially DCED, labor and industry together, and then strategize how are we going to still serve those that now don't have access to the same resources or same educational experiences that they may have had in the past.
So we do have things called teach-out plans when an institution closes in an orderly fashion, which doesn't always happen. Like if you remember University of the Arts down in Philadelphia, that was a very sudden closure, and that was pretty disastrous for the entire city. But if you're going to have an orderly closure, there are these things called teach-out plans, which is really about where are your students going to finish their credential? What's going to happen there? So there's some of that. I think you might be talking about maybe a little bit more,
Yes.
a little bit more comprehensive approach, but there's a foundation of that already exists that we might be able to build on.
I'll just add one thing. I think we have had a lot of really strong decisions made, particularly in PSHE, to set a foundation for the future. And I'm thankful to be a part of a system that didn't wait on this question longer than it did, that looked proactively to the future and said, what can we do to provide data systems, to provide information, integrations, whatever we need to do to build the foundation for the future. I think across the state, we have to just acknowledge that we've got some problems. We're very overbuilt in some areas, and shifting to whatever the next model is going to be painful, and it's going to be long. But the strategy is, and I hope the board takes this opportunity that we've been given, if we face it head on and come up with specific solutions, we'll be much better off now than if we wait. Mm-hmm. That to me is the underlying strategy, is one of just being clearly proactive to get the data to people so we can reach out and help each other in the ecosystem before we just wait for more to happen.
Thank you. Yes.
For both of these comments, which are related, to what extent do you think that this new entity called the State Board of Higher Education can contribute to this? Or do you feel that we have to get to a point where there's enough trust and credibility built up, right, with the State Board to be able to turn to the State Board and say, you know, we're looking to you? So institutions look to the State Board to say, you know, help us come up with solutions, with comprehensive solutions, with overarching, you know, strategies. Are we there yet, or would it take a while for institutions to feel comfortable, you know, asking the State Board to take such a role?
I would say just the creation of the board is a huge step forward. And transparency brings a lot of ideas to the table. And I think the trust will be built as required transparency and accountability are start to be shared and expanded, for sure.
Any other comments? This is our last goal. Okay. Thank you very much. We got some of the comments that you provided today. Strategies echoed what we've heard in other regions, and some of them are totally new to us. And so both of those kinds of comments are really important to us. We are going to be systematically compiling everything that people said. We're going to be identifying themes by region, by goal. All of that is going to go into contributing to the strategic plan and the strategies that we're going to use under each one of those goals. And we are required by law to set those strategies, to identify metrics, and to report annually on our progress against those goals. And I tell you that because this is not going to be a situation whereby we write a strategic plan and it sits and collects dust. It's going to be a living document for us. And it's also going to help us for the very first time set priorities for how we might want to engage the legislature or the governor's office regarding what's most important to do for our higher education sector. So this is deeply impactful work that we're all doing together right now. And we look forward to sharing the draft plan. And there'll be opportunity to comment on that once it's posted. And we look really forward to adopting that strategic plan so that we can really start to prioritize our work together, because that's exactly what you keep pointing to, the need to collaborate to figure out how we're going to address these problems together. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my board chair.
And all I want to do is echo what Kate said. This was an extraordinarily rich discussion, I think. And I thank everybody again for being here and contributing. And again, it's not your only opportunity. Go to that survey even a month from now if you think of something. All brilliant ideas are welcomed. And we look forward to seeing you again and reporting back to you. Thank you. And thank you again, President Anderson, and your entire team here at Penn West and at Penn West Edinburgh in particular. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.